Okay, I will reconvene the City Council meeting, special council meeting of the, which is today, already lost track, 22nd. Begin this afternoon session with a presentation from Mr. Hobbs regarding the Redlands Mall.
Mayor Harrison, I have a potential conflict of interest on this source of income, and I'll have to recuse myself.
Thank you. Ed,
okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Dan Hobbs, Redevelopment Economic Development Director, and I have with me today John Yonai, an economist with Tierra West, and you have interacted with John previously on some other issues. We have for you a brief presentation on the Redlands Mall. And the two takeaways, I'll give you the takeaways right at the beginning, the conclusions, if you will, as we see them. Number one, we are paying attention as a government and as an agency to the Redlands Mall, number one. Number two, there are alternative scenarios or things that might happen there, but there is no magic bullet. There's no silver bullet for resolving that situation. We're going to walk through some things that are likely scenarios and talk about the pros and cons of those so that you are fully briefed and so the community also has a better understanding of what we face across the street there. General Growth Properties, as the owner, we call them GGP for short. On April 16th of this year, they filed for bankruptcy under Chapter 11 of the bankruptcy law. And in addition, Gottschalk's, which is the major tenant of the mall, has filed for bankruptcy. That's under Chapter 7, which is called liquidation. My comments today, as I mentioned, will be followed with an economic perspective on the mall by John Yonai. The first sheet is basic facts on the mall. And we just want to touch on some of these things as we go through here. It was built in 1977. It was purchased by Redlands Mall of America in 2002 for $8.9 million. A couple years later, General Growth purchased it. And they purchased it for a 50% increase. And I mention that because when I ask the question as we go through these discussions, could that buy and flip kind of tactic happen again? The mall has a total leasable space of 175,000 square feet. Gottschalk's is 95,000 of that, almost a little over half. And it's very, very significant. You know the mall, you've been there, Gottschalk's dominates the mall. The annual sales tax revenue is about $250,000 a year. And of that amount, Gottschalk's was the major portion. I mentioned that General Growth is in Chapter 11. Chapter 11 under bankruptcy law is actually, it's designed to protect the corporation. It keeps creditors from coming in and just picking you apart as a company. It buys you time to work out a plan with the court or through the court with your creditors. So Chapter 11 is a protective portion of the bankruptcy law. Chapter 7 is not. Chapter 7 is liquidation. That means you're going out of business. The city owns and maintains the mall parking, 905 spaces. And we own the spaces around the mall. We own the spaces in the garage and then across the street. That runs us about $120,000 a year. The value of those three mall parking parcels that I just referenced in 2006 appraisal numbers was $7.4 million. We know that probably wouldn't be the figure today, but those are the 2006 numbers. Let's talk about what might happen here. As we go into this, we have three assumptions. Very basic. Number one, we assume the council will provide policy direction at some point. Number two, we assume there is a preference to keep the mall in private hands. And number three, we are assuming there is a scenario in here that would best execute the council's vision. But the council will have to assess that. You will have to say what of these kinds of things that could happen is in the best interest of Redlands, and is there anything we can do about that? Is there anything we should do about that? 5 alternative scenarios. The 3 on the left, called laissez-faire, are strictly private sector. A reminder, Dan McHugh constantly reminds me of this as we have mall discussions, and it's an excellent point. He says, Dan, I just want to remind you, GGP owns the mall. We don't own it. It means we can't get in control. As long as they own it, they're in charge. So these 3 on the left are laissez-faire, where General Growth is calling the shots. The 2 on the right are where there is more city control. But again, that doesn't happen without some kind of interaction with General Growth. Let's look at the pros and cons of each of these alternative scenarios. The first is bankruptcy. Again, I mentioned Chapter 11 provides them some protection. They survive for a while. It also means someone could come in and purchase them all very cheaply. We know that General Growth has been approached by interested parties. We know that for a fact. It's also an interesting point that there is no debt on this mall. Remember, General Growth is the second largest mall owner in the country. They own $29 billion worth of assets. They have hundreds of properties. This is one of their smaller properties, but it's interesting to note that it's debt-free. So on the pro side, bankruptcy gives them some protection, gives them some time. On the con side, who's in charge? Who's in charge? How does the city impact the mall given bankruptcy? If we want to make a move, who do we talk to? Well, there is a committee of trustees that's been appointed by a judge, but who are these folks? How do you get a decision out of those folks? I do have RDA legal counsel following this and reporting out every 2 weeks what's going on. The latest move has been, right now, a lot of procedural filings in the bankruptcy court, and General Growth asking for permission to handle or dispose of any of their assets that are valued under $5 million. Second possible scenario, a General Growth hold strategy. This seems to be, frankly, what is going on right now, given, number one, their behavior, and number two, their press releases. They say we will emerge from this experience stronger and leaner. And it's because with the way things are going and under bankruptcy law, they would intend to shed their poor performing properties that are debt laden. Okay? So they get rid of the bad stuff, try to keep the good stuff, and move on. The pros of this kind of an approach are, this is the second largest mall owner in the country. They're supposed to know what they're doing. They're supposed to be good at their business. And it keeps us out of the mall business. There's nobody here that wants to get in the mall business. The city manager's made that clear. I'm making that clear. The city attorney's made that clear. I think you've made that clear. No one wants to get into the mall business. So those are the pros. The cons are the nightmare of a slum mall. Well, I'll just use that figure because it's a handle. What's a slum mall? Well, it could be a real tacky flea market that's trashy, and you got youth roaming around. It's a nightmare scenario. Hopefully would not happen. But again, we're looking at the realm of all possibilities. Another con is the Redlands Mall is not a significant asset to General Growth Properties. That plays both ways. They might get rid of it just as an afterthought, or they might not be paying attention to it. Real big issue, if they've got a hold strategy, how are they going to get by without Gottschalks? Now, there are parties that are going into vacuums filled by Gottschalks. I'll just mention 2 stores. One is Macy's, interestingly enough. I'm told up in Fresno, where Gottschalks was, a beautiful river park. Macy's is coming in there. That's an upside there. I'm hearing that Forever 21 is a candidate to maybe go in someplace, but you just don't know. So those are rumors at this point. Another con of a hold strategy where they just try to get by is not much is happening there, and not much may happen for as much as 10 years till it's really ripe for redevelopment. Third scenario,